Yo guys, what is up? Moxie here with another Path of Exile 2 video, and today we're going to be going over my plans to league start a wolf form build. Now, I'm actually not currently planning on playing the Druid Ascendancy, and I kind of want to talk about the different Ascendancy options, which ones I think are going to be best for the wolf form, as well as some synergies, some specific uniques. We've got new gameplay of the wolf form and more. We'll be going over everything you guys need to know. Hope you enjoy the video. Let's do this. So I was a bit torn between league starting other theory crafted build that I'm going to be making a video about, which is kind of a rage stacking poison pathfinder, which got massively buffed. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to start a wolf form build because honestly, the gameplay of it that ZiggyD showed off during the reveal just like wasn't very impressive looking. But we've since got new gameplay from ZiggyD, who's going to be featuring in this video. And the wolf form had some really impressive looking early burst damage, enough so that like my concerns about it being a little bit low damage and low clear were pretty much all relieved by just this video. I'll have a link down to the full gameplay if you want to watch it. I'll be featuring all of the wolf gameplay that he showed during this video though. But I wasn't sure if we were going to be playing maybe an ice monk build to level and we wouldn't be able to swap into wolf form until we were later on, because it looked like it could do decent single target, but how would we solve clear? And this video alleviated a lot of my concerns. So wolf is looking really good, and I think we're going to be able to play it basically starting from level 1 or whatever level you can get your first talisman. So that's really exciting to me. Now, there's only so much theory crafting and build prepping that we can do, as we still don't have the full skill tree. We don't have all the numbers on the different skills, the new support gems, new uniques, and more. However, one of the biggest decisions that we can start planning is what Ascendancy are we going to play? What class are we going to click day one to play our wolf build? So I want to cover some different Ascendancy options, their pros and cons, and which one I plan on playing. So the first is kind of the obvious one, which is playing the Druid class. It's new, and then picking Shaman. Shaman's got some really interesting things for it. However, it's not really the one that I'm currently planning on playing. There are some really unique interactions here that could be pretty interesting. The first actually has to do with survivability. Now, we don't really have the info on this node or what this is yet, so could be potentially interesting. This could play a role on if we play a Druid or not. But the first synergy has to do with reactive growth, which gives you a adaptation when you're hit by elemental damage. And if you go one further node up, you get Avatar of Evolution, which gives you a percentage of your physical damage taken as multiple different elements. So you're going to be taking cold, fire, and lightning damage. This is very helpful because, one, adaptations are going to mean that we take less elemental damage. So converting Fizz is going to allow us to benefit from those adaptations. We take less damage, plus you have elemental resistances, so you're taking even less damage from that conversion. So this is very good survivability and should help keep us tanky. However, there's even more interactions past that. The first is that we know there is a wolf form buff that gives you a blessing that gives you added cold damage, and that blessing scales off of how much rage you have and lasts longer if you have more rage. By starting on the Druid side, we're going to be closer to the nodes for rage on melee hit. And if we pick up the Nagamuhu's Chosen Ruby Charm, this gives us, whenever we take fire damage from a hit, we have a chance to grant up to our maximum rage on use. Anytime we're taking physical damage now with that node, we're going to be guaranteed taking fire damage. So if enemies are hitting us, we're going to be possibly gaining our full rage, which could be really, really helpful for keeping up our buffs. And rage inherently also gives you more attack damage. So that is a synergy that playing the Shaman would allow for us. There's also the Scold's Bridal Helmet that we take a percentage of our mana cost you pay for skills as physical damage. That physical damage would then get converted to fire damage, which would then fuel more of our rage. But it would also, whenever we're hitting enemies, would then also further build up adaptation. So anytime we're casting, we're going to be taking damage, but we're going to be building up basically DR. And so we're going to be able to stack that up on ourselves. We don't know the stack limit for adaptations or how that works, but potentially could allow you to stack up tons of adaptation stacks to get really tanky, which would be really cool. So there's a lot of defensive synergies for playing the Shaman. I don't think there's as much offensive options. I currently don't really plan on incorporating spells, so the Druidic Champion node seems like kind of a waste. There's definitely some interesting things you could do with Furious Wellspring so that you could stack up Rage and get some mana regen, but that would require some very specific gear. I do think that the Wisdom of the Magi node, that you gain additional benefits from bonded modifiers on runes and idols, could be very interesting, and Sacred Flow for some extra spirit could be nice, but if I was going Shaman right now, the main things I'd be going it for is for some extra survivability, and also the fact that we don't know the skill tree for the that's going to be launching in point 4, and if there's a bunch of like very specific wolf nodes or shape-shifting nodes, which from Ziggy's video we already saw that there are some, potentially starting on that side of the tree could inherently have some big benefits. After recording this video, I did just have an idea for a Shaman build I wanted to mention. Could be kind of interesting. I'd be curious to how it's going to work, scaling like a hybrid melee spellcaster. But if you did want to go that route, having Rage also grant you more spell damage could be interesting if you did a hybrid caster with the werewolf form where you're doing maybe like a cast on freeze comet, or cast on like crit, or cast on elemental like invocation, where you're calling down the comets. Comets are big damage, they're getting buffed, they do big cold damage, and you could do like a wolf form where you're spamming around, getting a bunch of rage, being tanky, and then also calling down comets from the sky. Could also maybe pair that with Apocalypse. Could be interesting. Would be very visually cool. How much damage it actually do, I'm not sure. But would be a cool way to justify going Shaman, is if you incorporated like comets and Apocalypse, and the rage applying to your spells so that you're actually hitting decent damage with your like cast on comet setup. Could be pretty interesting. Now, the Ascendancy that I'm currently planning on playing would be Amazon. I think Amazon's going to be really good with wolf form for a lot of reasons. The first is we can get Critical Strike node. This gives us a, let me zoom in a little bit more. Our chance to hit with attacks can exceed 100%. We gain additional critical hit chance equal to 15% of excess chance to hit with attacks. This is going to enable us to stack up crit chance a whole lot easier. Getting to crit cap in PoE 2 is a lot harder than it is in PoE 1, and I think this node is very powerful for helping us get crit, because I think we're going to be mainly scaling like melee, cold, and crit, and so getting more crit damage is pretty huge from that. The other nodes that I'm very excited about on Amazon are the Mystic Harvest. Your life leech recovers based on your elemental damage as well as physical damage. This is a big increase to our survivability. Leech is all right in PoE 2. It's not the strongest thing. However, with the Essentia Sanguis gloves, which I believe are going to be made more rare in this upcoming patch, so definitely something to keep a note of. But our life leech is converted to energy shield. So if we're getting elemental leech, then all of our elemental damage, which we're mainly going to be focusing on, is going to be regenerating our energy shield instead of our life, which is kind of massive. Energy shield is a very strong defensive layer, but it needs a certain amount of time to basically not get hit to in order to recover. This would allow us to have constantly recovering energy shield protecting our life, which would be really massive, and Amazon enables that playstyle, so I think that's a really, really powerful synergy. The other node is Stalking Panther. This gives our evasion rating from our equipped helmet, gloves, and boots being doubled, and the evasion rating from our body armor is halved. This is another nice defensive layer. Basically, we'd go full energy shield chest piece and then big evasion on our helmet, gloves, and boots, which we'll talk about our helmet in a second. And then the last thing we would do is I'm potentially planning on going Predatory Instinct, so you get 50% more damage against enemies within open weakness. So we just have more damage against rares and uniques. So we're getting 2 damage nodes, 2 survivability nodes. I think it'd be pretty balanced. We're also in a very good starting spot playing in Amazon. There's a lot of different nodes here that are really good, but particularly on the wolf form, some of the nodes that I'm most interested in are more up on this upper side. Once again, we don't know the skill tree for like the Druid side, but Heavy Frost I think is going to be a big pickup. hits ignore non-negative elemental resistances on frozen enemies. From what we've seen, we're basically going to be freezing everything. So getting this node, I think, is going to be really helpful until we get to like late endgame, where you can get other ways to ignore enemy resistances. But Amazon, there's tons of cold nodes, there's tons of speed nodes here. We're a good starting spot plus a good ascendancy. The other ascendancy that I think is kind of interesting is Invoker Monk. I think the wolf form is going to play a lot like a cold monk, and on Invoker Monk, you can get I Am the Blizzard, which gives you extra damage as cold. This isn't like all that impressive to me. We've got like other ways of creating chilled ground just inherently with the wolf skills. 10% of extra damage as cold is good, but there's like plenty of ways to get all these extra damages. I Shall Rage giving us Unbound Avatars, a 40% more elemental damage increase. That's really good. I like that. There's a node for Lead Me Through Grace, so we get a bunch of extra spirit from our body armor, which would be nice. And then there's also Sunder My Enemies, which critical hits ignore non-negative enemy monster elemental resistances. As I said, there's like that cold node, so this isn't as crazy. But I think Invoker Monk is going to be pretty like natural playstyle because it's already got a very cold focused build. I think this would be a solid ascendancy. I just don't think Invoker Monk is going to scale as well, like with really crazy gear and hyper endgame as well as Amazon would. To be honest, I think Amazon's just kind of a stronger ascendancy, although I do think Invoker Monk with like low gear investment would be really solid. So that kind of covers it for ascendancies. There is the option of going, for example, like Tactician, if you wanted to scale the damage of the werewolves. I just haven't seen much support in actually making the werewolves do a lot of damage, as they seem to be kind of like something that you can only summon through activations of other things rather than something that you can always have active. So I don't know if they're going to be super reliable for damage scaling. However, I do plan on using the like werewolves that you can summon as utility, and a big part of that is an interaction I'm about to go over, which is with the Starkanja head. I think it's very fitting that this is going to be, I think, one of the best in slot uniques to go pick up. For wolf form, it's going to give us increased evasion rating, increased crit chance, added dexterity, increased evasion rating when we're on low life, and the big thing is 15% of damage from hits is taken from your damageable companion's life before you. This should allow our wolves to soak up 15% of the damage that we would take, which is huge, and it's got like good evasion rating base. It's like really good for everything that we're going to want to do, and will allow our wolves to soak up some damage for us. Now, to pair with the Starkanja hood, I plan on also using the Umbilicus Immortalis until we get something like a Headhunter, which would be later on. But I think this is going to be really interesting because while we have the Umbilicus Immortalis on, we have reduced flask effect duration. However, our minions get up to 30% increased max life. Our life flask also apply to our minions, so they're gonna be taking damage from the Starkanja, but they're gonna have more life, and we're gonna be able to heal them. And our minions cannot die while affected by a life flask. This, in theory, gives us a permanent, basically, we just take only 85% damage from hits rather than 100% damage from hits, which is going to be an additional defensive layer. And also keeping up the minions and keeping them alive will, one, increase our damage, but also increase our survivability. If we've got more things up, there's going to be less things targeting us. We've got an option. There's a new like predator mark that increases the damage we do to enemies the more enemies that enemy is surrounded by. So if we have our wolves up more often, once again, we're going to be doing more damage. So I'm planning on using the like wolf minions as a way to get utility and survivability. Not probably going to be scaling their damage all too much, but keeping them alive, having them take damage for us, and using them to increase our damage from predator mark should be really solid. The next thing to mention, I probably should have talked about this at the beginning of the video, but is how like wolf form actually functions. So when you're in wolf form, when you are out of combat for a little bit, you'll go down on all fours and you'll move faster. And in addition, in wolf form, you get granted new skills. One of those is your basic attack, or your main thing is your basic attack, which is Shred, which when you hit a frozen enemy with Shred, you create these icy projectiles or ice shards. So this is some footage, and we see Ziggy's using either like Lunar Assault, which is giving you basically a bunch of freeze buildup. As soon as this boss is frozen, all of these ice shards, we hit them with Shred, all of these ice shards kind of land nearby, and the burst damage is pretty wild. So like a big thing for like single target is going to be freezing our enemy, shredding them to create these ice shards, and then those ice shards detonating for a lot of single target damage. I'll play the clip so you can actually see it. But you can see all those little like ice shards flying off, and then they all detonate in an AoE for some pretty good burst damage at like this stage of the game. And so I think Wolf Form's not gonna really have many issues with like single target damage, to be honest. We're going to be able to scale those ice shards, those AoE, the damage. We're going to be increasing our damage. We're going to have tons of different buffs. There's so many different buff skills to use. Just to give you an idea of like all of the different buffs that we're basically going to be able to place on an enemy, we're going to be able to Arctic Howl, which is going to be a war cry, which is going to empower our attacks, giving them added cold damage. There's also Lunar Blessing for the wolf, which is going to give us a conversion of our fizz damage to cold damage, and also grant us 52% of our damage gained as cold damage. So we're going to be hitting very, very hard. There's also the new Savage Fury buff that whenever we're hitting an enemy, we gain Fury on attack. And while we have Fury, we get more damage and increased attack speed and movement speed. This is going to cost us some of our life per second, but I think more than worth for more damage, more attack speed, more movement speed. So we're going to be buffing up ourselves a ton and just kind of shredding and hitting enemies with all of our shreds and our lunar assaults and our cross slashes and all of our damage. I think it's going to play a lot similar to like an Ice Monk. And then for clear, we're probably mainly going to have Herald of Ice chaining explosions, do a bunch of damage. I also think it could be pretty interesting. There's some pretty clear-cut synergies between using like certain spells with the bear form to put down like volcanoes and detonate them with your explosions. I think there's a little bit less clear-cut synergies with using spells before you shift into werewolf form, besides the one that like causes enemies to be drenched so that they have more freeze buildup. That could be something to weave in, but I'm currently planning on throwing in Shattering Palm. This is basically something that we mark an enemy. We need to be holding a quarterstaff, so quarterstaff in one hand, potentially like quarterstaff talisman, and then we can Shattering Palm enemies, which we dash in, basically mark them, and then whenever we do enough damage to them, they cause a massive icy explosion. This is currently used on like Ice Monk builds to do like AoE screen clear paired with Herald of Ice. And I think detonating these Shattering Palms with our wolf form could be really, really sick. So Herald of Ice, Shattering Palm, chaining explosions for clear, and then single target damage I think is going to be mainly focused on shred, freezing, and blowing up those big ice shards. Should be really sick. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I'm so excited to League Start Wolf. There's still, so many questions about how we're going to like end up with the build and how it's going to perform at endgame, but it's looking really strong, especially from the early gameplay with literally no gear or no anything. If it's doing that amount of boss chunk now, I can't wait to see once we like fully scale and invest into it. I plan on covering the wolf form with full build guides. So obviously this one's a little bit more experimental, more theory craft, but I will have like my full build once the league actually starts. And I'll be streaming the whole thing live on Twitch. If you want to hang out and ask questions, or if you're having any issues with your wolf form, plan to be really pushing that and trying to get it as hyper efficient for endgame as possible. So I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Let me know your thoughts and what you plan to league start down below, and I'll catch you guys later. Take care. Peace.